boiling water is actually Canadian for lava. So I was right in a way.
Well, that's because they're too polite to have volcanoes up there.
What is happening? What is happening right now? Both of you, get out of here.
Welcome to the Beacon House Podcast, recorded live in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And so I took the blue pill. I took the blue pill, and now my pants don't fit right.
Well, unfortunately, you have to live with that because your reality is your own.
Yes.
Thanks a lot for tuning in today, guys. This is the Beacon House Podcast, and the very two confusing people you just listened to were Hunter and Casey. Say hi, you guys. How you doing?
Hi, you guys. How you doing?
Hi, guys. I'm Hunter. That was Casey.
I'm Casey.
We have a very special co-host today, Mr. Charles Traylor. We're going to talk about war, and we're going to talk about weapons. Because we're coming up on the 4th of July. When you guys are hearing this, it's going to be near the beginning of July. And, of course, we've already done how important it is to vote and all that kind of stuff. So we thought we'd keep this a little more lighthearted. Instead of me sitting here bitching about the Constitution, which is what everybody expects, instead we thought we'd talk about blowing shit up.
Oh, I thought the 4th of July episode was going to be about converting me to vote.
No, it's actually not.
Don't be afraid, though. It is totally political as well.
Yeah, take that.
It's also one of the only holidays where you can blow up a small portion of your country.
That's true. And
that is true, yeah.
And we're going to get to the best way to do that. So anyway, Zeke, thanks for being on the podcast today. Introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hey, my name's Zeke. It's what I go by. It's not my real name.
How did you get the nickname Zeke?
The nickname Zeke is actually a family one. My Uncle Kelly and my grandpa both called me that when I was growing up.
Any particular reason? They just thought that was a fun thing to call you?
It's actually because it was the Allied code name for the Japanese Zero fighter from World War II.
That was a code name for a fighter?
Yeah, but everyone referred to it as the Zero.
Interesting. Does anyone ever call you Zero?
Every once in a while on video games.
Well, you don't have to take that shit from anybody. Now, listen up, guys, real quick. Before we get into the episode about...
Wait a minute.
What?
You can't just... That's his gamer name.
I can zig and zag, baby.
Well,
Actually,
anybody technically, if you're getting shot at, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're getting shot at, you want to zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, zag, zig, 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 zag.
Is that true?
Because if you just zig and zag, they're
what's
just going to know where they're going to lead you.
If somebody's laying down a cover, what's the best way to avoid getting shot?
Serpentine pattern.
Right, but if you're doing this, when you come back this way, if they lead you, can't they hit you? So is it better to do like...
It depends on the situation you're getting shot at.
Okay.
If you're in an urban environment, there's so many different ways to avoid what's called kill zones, which is like streets, alleyways, that sort of thing.
Shit, this is getting scary.
I got a question for Zeke. All right, let's...
Okay, hold on.
Do what you got to do.
Well, listen. Ready. This is not to bring this sounds like it's going to be a really fun fucking episode, but not to bring it down a little bit, but I want to give a personal Beacon House dedication to a couple people that we lost this week in the spirit of all fairness. First, I would like to say rest in peace, Vinnie Paul, the drummer for Pantera.
Amen.
Whether or not you're a Pantera fan or a fan of metal at all, he was one of the best drummers that ever lived. And he was the brother to Dimebag Darrell, which probably maybe more people know. It was killed, unfortunately. Vinnie was not killed. They didn't really release any of the details, but he died this week. He was only 54. Mm-hmm. And just a super influential guy in my life. I can't tell you how many hours I spent listening to the songs where that guy played on them. And just, to his friends and family or anybody that was a fan of Vinnie, Godspeed. Also, another guy that we lost this week that's maybe a little more, maybe has a little more to do with a podcast is John Ward, who was the voice of the Vols. He was the radio announcer that called all the UT Vols games for years and years and years and years and years. Easily, in my opinion, the best radio vocal personality that there's ever been. And anybody that's old enough to remember when John Ward was on the radio talking about the UT Vols, it was more exciting than watching it on TV. And most people would turn the volume all the way down on the TV and turn the radio on in the room just to listen to this guy get excited about the game. He was incredible. And, I might have ever even wanted to do a podcast or talk in front of anybody if it wouldn't have been for listening to that guy. How exciting it could just be to hear somebody talk. And I'm not saying I am, but
he was legendary, but you're being too hard on yourself. I think whenever you speak, I get a little bit tighter in my jeans here, so.
It might have something to do with that blue pill you took at the top of the episode.
Yes, that's correct. I need to go buy some new pants.
Chick-fil-A sponsorship. that is your wallet. You come in with a Chick-fil-A.
What the fuck are you talking about?
He usually eats right before he comes in.
Speaking of bombs, yeah, Hunter just dropped possibly the most lethal bomb we're going to talk about the whole fucking
Hey,
episode.
I'm happy to have stuff crash and burn. Just remember, I'm here to try to make you happy, and that counts for something.
You just gave yourself a participation trophy, okay? Anyway,
I love you. Don't
I
listen
grew
to
up
him.
with participation trophies.
So you gave yourself a bronze star. That doesn't mean anything, really.
yeah, buddy.
hey,
So,
the people with the Bronze Star earn it.
is Bronze Star a code for something dirty?
No, I think
no,
that's brown
brown.
eye. Brown eye.
Casey.
Casey, also, it's not brown if it's bleached.
No, not this again. Not this again. No,
Oh, see, lift
get-
off.
no. Get
Yeah.
it.
Okay.
Oh my god.
All right, guys, listen. We brought Zeke on the show today, but because Zeke is a constant listener. Zeke listens to every single episode. He's usually the first person to comment on our YouTube channel when the episodes drop, and I thought it'd be really fun. Zeke's absolute point of expertise, other than video games, which I've heard Casey, you and Zeke talk about. It's fascinating to hear you guys talk about games, but his area of expertise is like war and military history and that sort of thing. And we've had a couple conversations where I would go, well, what was the thing that was invented that just changed the course of the whole war? And he would say, well, which war are you talking about? And I thought that'd be really cool to do an episode, like going back, talk about weapons and just mechanized things that changed the course of history and like all that kind of stuff. And you actually made a list of notes like that. But let's start off with like kind of like this, unless you guys have any questions you'd like to go. Casey.
I got one. Zeke, I want to know, what would you do if the world ended tomorrow?
Or today.
Not civilization as we know, but just like, zombie apocalypse, or maybe like the EMP zaps the power grid and
like
shuts everything down and everyone turns
post-apocalyptic.
on each other. What would a guy of your military knowledge, what would be the thing, like your plan? What's your plan?
Assess the situation and then plan around that. I mean, zombie apocalypse, probably just wait it out, find a place so far away from everyone to avoid the zombies, and just wait it out for it to run its course. EMP, it's actually not that hard. You just more or less have to wait or rebuild.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
for
think-
everybody listening, EMP, you're talking about electromagnetic pulse, right?
Right.
Like all electronics go
Which
out.
a lot of people say is how World War III will either be fought, or it's like it won't be a big battle as much as it'd be like on the computers and people taking down power grids and knocking internet out and like
Right.
turning people against their own people because everyone's so dependent on electronics nowadays.
Sure.
That's
sure.
a bigger question, though, because that is dangerous due only to the reliance that we have on technology now. So really what Zeke said about, like, it's not that big a deal if you just wait it out and let it either rebuild or get turned back on.
Right.
The only reason it is a big deal is because nobody knows how to fucking fend for themselves. And I've already cussed. Knows how to fend for
It
themselves.
sounded really badass the way I said it.
yeah.
You need to put a nickel in the swear jar then.
Yeah.
I can't do that.
I
This
wish I
podcast-
had a glass jar and a coin I could just hold out and make the clink clink noise.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's not room in it. I mean, Spencer and Casey are in here, too. So
No, it's just for you. You're the only one that's concerned.
Well,
where did all that money come from?
Let's talk about this. Let's go back to like the beginning. What were the first weapons ever to be used by humans? I'm guessing like knives and spears. And,
I was going to guess rock and a stick.
which would that sort of like a primitive tomahawk, or what would you say?
No, I mean like literally throwing rocks at people and beating them with sticks.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about something you could just, like you could pick up a clod of dirt and attack somebody. I'm talking about like an actual weapon that requires some kind of
Craftsmanship.
craftsmanship. You know, like and is widely used. Like more than one guy's using it. And you know.
The first like manufactured weapon type thing
Sure.
would be a more than likely it's either going to be a flint knife or a flint tipped bow and arrow.
Why was it always flint? How come they made shit out of flint?
Well, mankind's development is more or less judged by phases. The very first one's the Stone Age, followed by the Bronze Age, and then so on and so forth. The flint is the most common item to be found because it's the easiest thing to get and keep an edge on. But it's also really easy to make an edge on it because it's fairly malleable.
So it would break.
Yeah, you can break flint pretty easily, but it's also pretty easy to get an edge back on it.
Fucking A. Okay. And what about after that, moving forward? Like, what's the next big... when did a flint knife turn into, like, a big-ass spear or something?
Probably about the same time.
And how long ago are we talking?
Probably when man started roaming around on the earth.
So we're talking super primitive man.
Yes.
Pre-cities, this is still tribal, early tribal man.
Hunter-gatherers, yeah.
Got it. All right. And then what was the next big thing to come after that, weapon-wise?
Weapon-wise, that would be when man first found out that you could get metal from the earth, and he said, hey, this would probably make a really great tool. And then when that happened, he's like, hey, this is a lot sharper than this rock I've got here, so let's see if we can't make that into a knife or an arrowhead or a spear tip.
Okay, I get it. So it's kind of the same thing, but with metal.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's what they call metallurgy.
Metallurgy, but the first metals were bronze, basically. That's why it's called the Bronze Age.
Is that related to the... Zeke sent us some basic information so that we didn't sound like idiots completely talking earlier. Is that the sword that you mentioned at the beginning?
Yeah, the oldest sword that they've currently recovered has been dated to the early Bronze Age.
And I'm going to go ahead and guess that like the big deciding thing in weaponry, like I would get the most significant weapon invention would be when they finally invent the gun. Is that accurate, or because I feel like that's sort of like?
Did you say most exciting?
Well, no, I just feel like that's the defining moment in weaponry is
Not
the
really.
ability to shoot.
Not really.
Really, what would it be?
Well, honestly, the first shooting item you ever had was the bow and arrow. And they improved upon that by making it into what's called a crossbow. It's basically where you have a piece of rock, piece of wood, and you put the bow, instead of holding it in your hands, you instead put it on the board.
Gotcha.
And that lets you have a lot more torque to draw back on, which in turn imparts more kinetic energy.
Got it. And I've seen crossbows that are just fucking devastating. And didn't they make them really big too?
Yes, those
like two or three guys to operate it.
Those are siege engines.
Come on, how did you not know that?
Hold on, I want to dive deeper into the siege engine thing here in just a second. On the note of bows and arrows, to be fair to artillery, there's obviously calibers of bullets that make this not true, but with the standard, just like pistol or rifle bullet, like basically that a civilian could get at least. There is video footage proving maybe the stopping power is probably different, but the through line power of an arrow is stronger. Arrow, they get like a tub and fill it to capacity with sand to the point where it's like basically hard. A bullet stops like 2/3 of the way through, and the arrow goes clean through the whole thing. And that's probably more aerodynamics, I would imagine, than actual strength, but it maybe not. I don't know.
In order to kill a person, it's not so much how much penetration you get, it's how much hydrostatic shock you impart into someone.
Explain that a little bit for people that don't. Hydrostatic shock, what is that?
The easiest way to explain it would be like, you've seen pools of water.
Yes.
Perfectly still pools of water. When you throw a rock in it, you get those ripples.
Yes.
Hydrostatic shock is where the ripples get to the edge and then start bouncing back.
Okay.
Oh, okay. I've never heard that.
Hydrostatic shock in a human, that's your killer right there. Because all your organs, they don't take well to being jumbled really quick.
Right.
Really fast.
Got it. So you're not necessarily looking at something that can penetrate. You're actually looking for something that'll cause just a lot of trauma inside the body. And that's where bullets are more useful than arrows, I'm assuming?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Again, that's getting into penetration values, which some bullets are better at hydrostatic shock, some are better at penetrating.
Right. I gotcha.
Generally, a bigger bullet will penetrate better.
Okay. So what would you say is the if it's not necessarily the invention of guns, what was the defining moment of modern versus ancient warfare?
Logistics, basically.
Go on.
It's not a matter of what weapons you have. It's can you afford to make enough of them and field enough of them.
And that actually, I'm glad you said that, because that actually goes towards a point that we were going to get into here, is that, and even looking at the notes you sent me, so much of the wars, starting at like the Revolutionary War, and then going into the Civil War, and then moving forward, World War I, World War II, have so much to do with industry and not just somebody had a better plane or whatever. There's like a lot of military industrial.
Yes, there is some things about, we've got the best plane and everything, but it doesn't matter a hill of spit if you can't make enough of that weapon to field enough. That's
cover a certain area or that kind of thing. I got you.
Before we move on further, because I have a medieval style, like castle siege kind of question here. So whenever people would siege a castle and they would dump stuff over the side, was that lava or was that more like tar and feather,
Fuck you.
kind of?
Actually, no, it's neither of those, actually.
Eat shit. Eat shit.
It
Just
wasn't
because
lava.
Casey's wrong doesn't mean you're not wrong.
Shit.
It was boiling water.
Oh, okay.
Which is closer to lava
See, I would
than
have.
tar.
There's a lot of no toilet kind of system back then. I would put poop in it and dump poop on them.
Boiling water is actually Canadian for lava, so I was right in a way.
Well, that's because they're too polite to have volcanoes up there.
What is happening? What is happening right now? Both of you, get out of here.
Yeah, I don't really know what's happening.
Our
right now
guest
either.
laughed, so I'll stay.
Actually, I was just laughing in general. I wasn't laughing at you particularly.
Fuck, got shit on
Yeah,
so quick.
That's perfect. That's perfect.
I deserve that.
That's exactly what I wanted.
Wash arrogance. Can we talk about the siege engine before we go back into
Yeah, go for it.
industrialization?
Before we move into modern
I just
times.
want to hear you talk about what that is. 'Cause
Siege engine is just basically a weapon designed to inflict damage on a building, or to hurl something over a castle wall, or to.
so it's a type, not a specific thing.
It's a type of artillery.
Okay.
It's a really old type of artillery.
like a catapult or something.
yeah, catapult's a
Would
siege
qualify.
engine.
Okay.
The ballista, the big giant crossbow, it was called a ballista. Siege weapons. Whenever someone says siege weapon, you automatically think either Roman or medieval. That's because those are the two major eras that actually used them a lot. The Romans were wonderful military engineers. That's how they built most of their empire. They would first go in and conquer it, and then once the area was pacified, they would have these soldiers just standing around doing nothing, so they work on infrastructure, roads, bathhouses, that sort of stuff.
Okay, cool.
Using a cloth on a stick to wipe with. Ugh.
Ooh.
That's what they did in Rome.
Wait, are you sure? Sure they didn't just like wash?
No, I mean, have you not seen like old period pieces
Where
where
do you feel like the concept of the European bidet came from? It had to be from something like that.
I mean, but in Roman time, they just had like a stick with a sponge or cloth on it, and they would just use the bathroom and then put the stick. That's where the term shorthand, like short end of the stick, comes from.
Ew.
That's a pretty crappy topic. Do we want to back up into industrialization of war?
Shit. Get out.
God.
Get out.
It's a
I
great
love you
movie.
so much, but I just want to tip your chair over.
Luckily, you can't reach it.
Yeah, I got the short end of the stick on that one.
Yeah, you did.
God, stop. Oh, fuck. Okay.
Zeke, do you regret joining the podcast now? Is it
Absolutely not.
already
Number one
happened?
fan.
It's actually rather amusing, actually.
In your notes here, it says, during the American Revolutionary War, it was mostly won by applying economic pressure, which is weird to think of that as a weapon, but it absolutely is. Weapon technology was mostly limited to muzzle-loading firearms. So we're into firearms by then, and muzzles and like muskets, I guess, with like a knife on the end, bayonet or whatever.
Yeah, a bayonet. The bayonet actually started its life out as literally just a knife that you would stick in the end of your gun, but it didn't have a hole at the time. So when you stuck it in, you no longer had a gun. You just had a pike.
Like a spear.
Yeah.
And he had to take the fucking knife out to shoot.
He literally named the weapon a pike, and you changed it to spear.
I don't
Well, that's because a pike is kind of like a spear.
I know. I just want to give him a hard time.
eat shit, Casey. So, okay, but I want to get to the next thing you put. The only massive change to warfare was the Turtle, the first submersible vessel, when it tried to plant an explosive charge to British warship.
Can I guess what this is before you tell me what it is?
Talk about that thing, the fucking Turtle.
Is it basically just a bunch of wood that they would put in the water and set down? There was like maybe like a little air vent in it, and then they just Flintstones it, where they'd pick it up and you just see little feet running across the bottom of the lake.
It's not like that one scene from Pirates of the Caribbean, no.
Damn.
It's actually... They actually have it in the Smithsonian, if I'm not mistaken. and it actually looks like a giant beer keg for all intents and purposes.
Really?
Yeah, it's fully submersible. When you're operating it, they actually did tests, and a properly fit person can last about an hour or two operating it underwater.
So it was like an enclosed. It didn't have like an air supply or anything.
No, it was completely enclosed, and it had what air was in it was the air you had.
I feel like
all
this-
hand cranked, so in a way, it was kind of like the Flintstones.
Okay. I feel like the turtle operator was the guy that showed up at the bar and just talked about how awesomely fit he was. He's the CrossFit guy of the Revolutionary War. He'd just kind of walk in and be like, yeah, the turtle driver. And everyone's like, oh, God, here he goes. Hey, what'd you do? Do you drive turtle? No? You don't drive turtle? That's too bad. I do. I do it 12 times a day.
Yeah, all one guy of it who did one mission and it failed so badly they stopped using it.
Oh, turtle didn't turn out very well.
Yeah.
They tried to plant the charge, and they had a drill to drill a hole, plant the charge, and get away.
All right.
But the British warship had copper lining on the hull, and the drill couldn't get through it.
So this guy's literally down underwater with this fucking thing. He's got limited air. He's like trying to drill through the ship, can't do it. And
the British hear it, and they chase him off with musket fire.
Well, I hope they cleaned all the shit out of it before.
So basically, you're telling me that the CrossFit guy peaked in high school.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
There you go, Macho. So that leads us into like another pretty cool topic. Talk about like the earliest submersibles, because I feel like that whole thing is fucking terrifying. Like the first vessels that went underwater without the use of technology. I mean, you hear about these people that went over like Niagara Falls in like a
barrel,
or like they would build like metal things that would try to keep them safe, and like most of the people would fucking drown. Like, what was the early days of like people going in submersibles like, and what were the other submersibles? What was the first actually successful submersible?
Depends on how you define successful.
Submarine, something that people could get in and go underwater, not die, and could shoot.
That would be the S1 Holland submarine in 1901.
So they had a really fucking functional submarine in 1901.
What we would consider a submersible, yes. It wasn't a true submarine.
Because that's like 117 years ago.
Yes.
There was an actual submarine that worked.
Well, actually, no. There was one that predated that one, but it wasn't fully successful because
Civil War one.
Yes, that's the CSS Hunley.
What the fuck was that?
Easiest way to describe it would be to take a roughly 20 to 30 foot long piece of metal piping,
Okay.
seal off both ends, put a crew of 8 guys in there with hand cranks to turn the propeller, and have a manually operated ballast control.
I find that badass. Like, that is awesome.
That sounds
they did
terrifying
that.
to me.
It's absolutely terrifying.
It's terrible because think about it, no electricity, totally dark, right?
Yep.
Fucking, you're in there with these guys underwater. How did they get air? Did they just have like a?
They had what air they had in there.
They did Mars training.
Well, actually, no, it wasn't completely submersible because it couldn't go down that far, because the only thing they had was about inch-thick glass windows. So in order to have enough light to see, they have to be like no more than a foot or two down.
But it could go under the surface of the water,
Yes,
so they
it
could
could.
sneak up to people
Holy
in shallow.
cow.
That sounds terrifying.
Just hang out in a pond.
The Hunley killed all 3 of its crews. That's why it wasn't classified as successful, because the one mission it did, it sank a U.S. warship, but at the same time, it sank.
And I want to go ahead and say to the listeners right now, any of the stuff that you hear us talking about, the turtle, the Hunley, what the fuck ever, go Google it and see what it looks like. I bet it looks terrifying to think you were like, hey, you're going to go fight. Get in this. I'd be like, oh, shit.
So Spencer would not survive an EMP attack.
Definitely not.
Wait.
Oh man.
We're talking about Revolutionary War. We're not EMP yet.
No, I know, but I'm just saying he's putting out there that he can't function without electricity.
All right, moving forward, the American Civil War. And you said that, by contrast, the American Civil War is the first example of an industrial war.
Yes.
Which necessitated the development of weapons technology. So what do you mean by that?
Well, it's pretty much exactly that. In the industrial base was there, and military thinking of the time was still in what's called a Napoleonic mindset, where in order to inflict casualties, you had to cram like 100 guys shoulder to shoulder in 2 lines, walk to within 50 feet of the other guys, present your gun, and fire. Because most of the weapons were muzzle loaders.
Right.
But the one key difference is more or less all the weapons in the American Civil War were rifled, which is all rifling is just a little groove inside the barrel, imparts the spin to the bullet, makes it more accurate at range.
Quick question. What was the battle, I think it was Revolutionary War, I could be wrong, where they used the term wait till you see the whites of their eyes?
That was the American Revolution. I want to say it was Bunker Hill, if I'm not mistaken, right off the top of my head.
And that basically meant let them get close before you shoot.
Yes.
So you get like a better shot.
And here's the reason. This is one of my favorite things that we talked about in school for history class, was apparently there was 3 hills with like 2 valleys on either side where the troops came in.
Right. And
they backed up an American, what would it be, battalion? Or it was a small group of American soldiers up against a river. And they came in, and he says, wait till you see the whites of their eyes, because they wanted to get as close to the river because there was American troops up on each hill that came down and surrounded the British army and wiped them all out.
Fuck.
That's pretty bad.
I don't think that's exactly Bunker Hill, which was actually a defeat in the grand strategic thing.
Oh, never mind. I don't know what battle it was, but
well, no, you were kind of on the right track, but that's about how accurate muskets were. A rifled musket is different than a regular musket because rifling in the rifled musket.
Right.
A regular musket is accurate out to, if you're lucky, 50 feet.
Wow.
A rifled musket could accurately hit a target up to 250 yards.
And the rifled one is what you're talking about in the Civil War?
Yes.
Is when that came along? Okay.
Well, it actually came out a little bit earlier. Rifles have been in use since there's been firearms. Mm-hmm. It's just once the American Civil War started, brewing, it actually became cheap enough to mass produce.
Okay.
So you were looking, pun intended, straight down the barrel of a war that's going to be real heavy and like mechanized fire, like firepower, firearms and stuff. You noted here, you say that the major game-changing weapon that was developed and produced in numbers was the Henry repeating rifle, which is a precursor to the Winchester repeating rifle. Now, when you say a repeating rifle, is that sort of like a precursor to an automatic rifle?
No, a repeating rifle is it's a semi-automatic weapon. There were 2 different rifles. The Spencer was actually more popular, but the Henry was
naturally.
Don't get so full of yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Ooh, our guest told you to get out.
Still more popular.
Anyway, the reason the Spencer rifle was more popular was because
I'm badass.
Basically, if you see a Winchester rifle, like a hunting rifle, you're looking at a highly modified Henry.
Got it. So that was sort of like did you say that was like the father of all modern rifles?
In many ways, yes.
Okay. Let's move forward. And then we talk about the American Civil War then. So we started seeing rifles that have repeating rifles, more high-tech guns. And again, quoting what you've typed here, World War I was the bloody result of massive industrial development and a lack of development in tactics of fighting. Mm-hmm. There was another modern war that no nation really looked into and took lessons from. The war in question was the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, which showed how things quickly developed into trench warfare without much in the way of maneuver. Mm-hmm. The weapon that made World War I the bloody mess it was, which if you ask me is probably the most destructive of the things made, is the Maxim machine gun. The Maxim was sold to both sides in some form or another and was used from 1886 to 1959 and by 29 countries. Mm-hmm. So massively popular, very widespread weapon. Mm-hmm. And talk a little bit about that, about World War I and that machine gun.
World War I was just a mess.
That's what I've heard. Everything I've read about World War I, it was just fucking crazy.
Yeah, it was just a giant mess that was just percolating and brewing, so to speak, ever since Napoleon was deposed from the French Empire.
Okay.
The Russo-Japanese War, none of the major Western powers took that into consideration because no one really viewed the Japanese as, equivalent to the Western powers. And no one really took the Russians seriously because they're not truly a Western power. So they had all these lessons that they could have learned from, but they didn't. I don't know if I could pronounce the name. The Battle of Tsushima. It was the first quote-unquote modern naval battle.
Why did they say that?
It was the first one where you had modern steel ships firing armor-piercing rounds. And it was just a slaughter on the Russian part.
Up until that point, were naval battles basically just sort of like, I would picture like pirate ships sailing and like firing cannons at each other. And,
Yeah, that's pretty much what it was.
Okay.
Now, picture that style of fighting, but with guns that could hit something at a quarter of a mile to a mile distant.
Fuck. Okay.
But yeah, the Russo-Japanese War quickly devolved down into trench fighting because the firepower of the rifles in question was way more than what anyone was thinking. Because they were using more or less what was called Napoleonic tactics. Same thing they did in the Civil War, basically.
Okay.
You just advanced at the other guy and slammed away until he gave up.
Right, and you're taking a lot of casualties.
Yes, with modern weapons. But you're using tactics from like 100 years earlier.
So it's like if people today lined up with AKs and M4s, but across from each other and
At
ran
about
while shooting.
100 feet, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
World War I was an industrial war. Let me say that right off the bat.
Okay.
Because you had mass industrialization. You could produce hundreds of millions of rounds, hundreds of thousands of rifles. You could literally swamp someone with firepower. So you had these massive armies. The French could mobilize like 1 million men when war came.
Okay.
But the command and control structure for these armies was from 100 years ago, where armies were like 50,000 men, 100,000 men.
So when did that finally change? When did it start being... when did the tactics catch up to the industrialization of the weaponry and stuff?
In World War I.
Okay.
Where you had to adapt to what the weapons could do.
And who did that?
It's the guy who's fighting at the time who basically starts figuring out ways of countering what he's seeing.
And this
Interesting.
evolved into the trench warfare is what you're saying, like ultimately duck down and just wait out a chance to shoot.
It literally first started out as, okay, we've got these guys shooting like 50 rounds a minute at us. We got to hit the dirt. And then they started digging in to get a little bit lower. Next thing you know, they're digging what's called a firing position, as what we know it now. You start digging firing positions. Well, you have to be able to connect them, so they started digging to expand them. And next thing you know, you got trenches.
So you basically have like Napoleonic tactics, which is just send a wall of men at the other, which that also sounds really medieval to me.
In a way it is, but at the same time, these tactics were developed when you had the musket, not the rifled musket. So it's before they started developing them when firearms started becoming a thing.
Okay, and then the big break becomes trench warfare. That's the successor to Napoleonic tactics.
And basically all that is just siege warfare.
Okay.
You're basically trying to outweight the other guy.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to World War I, where does Lawrence of Arabia fit in?
Lawrence of Arabia he actually was a person, and he was an actual British officer, so he is real, and he was sent to the Middle East to try and help the British forces there secure the oil fields.
Okay.
He wanted to press for a openly Arabic state that would, and it's, oh God, that's another thing about the First World War. It caused so many problems worldwide.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the nations in the Middle East now are only nations by the geographical maps, because the Western powers at the end of World War I said that's how they should look. And a lot of the lines and everything crossed into what was native lands for some people, forcing them to have to intermingle where they were like bitter enemies.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Which we're still hearing about that every single fucking day on the news. Yeah.
Now, but with Lawrence of Arabia, what did he do that made him so popular for World War One? Was it just because he held the oil fields for the British, or
he organized the Arabs more or less to fight the Ottomans?
Okay,
which at the time the Ottomans were over the Arabs.
Gotcha.
At the end of World War One, the Ottoman Empire was just ruined. It was crushed. It was dying before World War One. After World War One, it was
done.
They buried it.
Okay.
Wait, is that this could be very way off base, but roughly an equivalent to the way that we armed Afghanistan and all that back in the 80s to help them out, and then it devolved because they maintained some of those tactics and those weapons that they didn't have previously. It's a similar situation as far as like what you were saying, because I know the geography is the big problem, but they have this guy come in and help teach them new things and probably introduce some new weaponry, I'd imagine, and then...
actually, no, he made do with the weapons he had. I mean...
Okay, so he didn't bring that part. It was just...
They had weapons. They were older weapons, but a rifled musket's still going to be able to kill a guy.
True. Okay.
Sure.
I mean,
sure.
He made do with what he had. I mean, he did have... The British did send him with some equipment, but it wasn't a major investment in equipment because they couldn't afford to.
Well, now here you say that moving on and getting into World War II, which is the war my dad was in. Actually, he was stationed in the Philippines.
Yeah.
But you said it is the highest form of what you could call industrial warfare. And the noticeable difference is the fact that the U.S. military was the only force to have semi-automatic weapons issued to the most common of soldiers, where all other nations still had the main weapon as a bolt-action rifle.
Yep.
Which sounds like a huge fucking advantage.
It is, because when the Army was going through trials and everything, because they needed a new weapon and everything after World War I, because they were wanting something with a little bit more firepower than the 5 rounds that a Springfield 1903 rifle had at the time.
Was that the old standard issue?
Yeah, it was actually the standard issue for a lot of people up until the Vietnam War.
Okay.
It's mostly issued to like sharpshooters and snipers, but I mean, it's still going to kill someone.
Let's talk about, speaking of standard issue, let's talk about the Colt 45.
Okay.
Which was standard issue military sidearm for years, and then they switched for a while, I believe, to the Beretta 9mm.
The Beretta M9, yes. I actually trained on that when I was going through the EIB training.
Okay, but then they switched back recently to the Colt.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I'm not really too keen on the particulars about it. They switched from the 1911 to the M9 because the 1911s they had in service had been in service generally since around World War I, World War II. So they were starting to be worn out.
Right.
There's only so much you can do short of buying a whole new weapon in terms of repairs.
Right.
They were like, hey, the 1911 doesn't work anymore. It's not accurate. Blah, 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 blah. We need a new weapon. So they had military trials, and the M9 Beretta, which is actually the civilian version, is the M82 Beretta. You can actually purchase it on the open civilian market. It's a 15-round 9mm pistol. Honestly, the major advantage it had was ammunition for it was a lot cheaper, so you could have more training on it, and you had more rounds.
Got it.
The 1911 had 7 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. The M9 had 15 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber.
Okay. So so that's the Beretta 9mm. What is the Glock 9mm? Because that's another one you hear a lot about, like in rap songs.
I think that's just a different brand, isn't it?
Expensive.
Same gun, just different maker.
Yeah, it's a different maker. I don't like Glock.
A lot of people don't.
It's too much plastic, if you ask me. Call me old-fashioned, even though I'm nowhere near old enough to be old-fashioned.
Like Spence.
Yeah, I mean, he's ancient as all get out.
Eminem once called them Ninas. He said 2 Ninas under my jeans, either side of my penis. So you're wrong.
But it's nice to know that you know that.
Yeah.
Get me out of this nightmare.
I'm glad you can't make it stop. Make it stop.
Yeah.
Someone give me a Glock so I can put myself out of my misery.
Oh man.
Use a 1911 and
All right,
okay.
so we get up through World War II, and now we've got automatic weapons, and we've got all this stuff. We've got a lot of modern like tanks and planes and all. You know, there's a lot of shit. You know, by the time World War II.
The reason World War II is what I'd classify as an industrial war is because you're getting quicker feedback. You can develop things faster because mass production's progressed.
Sure.
Metallurgy's improved. I mean, there's a lot of improvements. So you can develop things faster as you find out you need them.
What are your favorite weapons or vehicles from World War II?
Which nation?
America. Let's say American.
Yeah.
My favorite weapons, are we talking like stuff that I could carry personally?
Doesn't matter. I'll give a tank, plane, fucking anything.
I would have to say my favorite weapon would probably be the M2 heavy machine gun.
Okay, why? What's so special about that?
It was originally designed as an anti-tank weapon.
Okay, what does that mean?
It was designed to shoot tanks.
Okay, great. But does that mean it's like so big that a guy can't carry it? It's like on a stand?
It's when it's fully assembled, it's like almost 200 pounds.
Okay, so not too big for a guy to carry around.
It's too big for a guy to carry around, but if you have it strapped on a vehicle, it's perfect.
Okay, so
it was issued to just about anything with wheels or treads or
like so.
wings.
We're thinking like Rambo's up on the back of the Jeep, just like cutting the fucking forest down.
In the latest Rambo movie, that's an M2 heavy machine gun.
Oh, it was so rad.
Dude, that
too.
thing blew people in half.
It was incredible. It just turned him into.
That's because it's firing a shell that's about half an inch in diameter.
Yeah. It's a crazy weapon.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've shot an old like World War II style weapon, the Mosin Nagant.
Russian M1898 Mosin Nagant. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was used World War II with Russia.
It was used from 1898, as it says in the title, up through World War II.
Okay.
In fact, the round for that particular weapon is still in use today.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, I got to shoot one when I lived in Florida, and it was awesome. Although it didn't have, it just had a metal piece on the stock, and so after shooting it a couple times, I got a concussive headache, like right here in the middle of my forehead.
Yeah, it's the Mosin Nagant it's the AK of its time. That's the one thing about Russian weapons. They are designed to be used by any idiot with 2 brain cells. And they're designed to work with as little maintenance to them as possible.
I got you. I'd say that's probably like a huge problem. Like designing weapons is they can't be too complicated for guys to use.
Well, it depends on the educational level of the people you're going to be
which is
giving
the average
these weapons
soldier,
to.
which you can never predict. It could come from anywhere. Like it could.
Yeah. I mean, it helps if it's as simple as possible, but at the same time, you also got to take into account the average intelligence.
Right.
Like,
which if you listen to this podcast, you know it's pretty low.
Yeah. I mean, y'all invited me here, so I mean, that's got to say something.
There you go. You're becoming one of us. You're taking a shot at yourself.
Oh man,
we don't know shit.
I have a question now that we've gotten more modern with our discussion here. How do you think World War III will be fought? Because a lot of people think it'll be over the internet. You won't even see much about it. It'll just happen behind closed doors on computers, things like that. Other people disagree. I just kind of, what do you think?
How I think World War III is going to be fought? Well, I can honestly tell you there's not going to be any veterans from it.
So basically, if there was a World War III, we would wipe ourselves out completely at that point.
It depends on what you're using.
Okay.
If you go for what you said earlier, an EMP style attack, you can survive that. I mean, all EMP does is wipe out electronics.
However, it makes any electronics not usable for, like, it kills them completely, correct? So you'd have to, like, start from scratch again.
You would have to rebuild it, yes, but it doesn't affect the physical structure.
Okay.
It's just the electronical components that get fried.
Okay.
So, I mean, it would take some time doing it, but you could recover from that.
But do you think the modern person who would just, you know, your normal Facebook, Twitter, Instagram user, or like your normal person, I feel like they would probably lose their mind because they think it's dead forever.
Yes, the millennials, if they weren't instantly wiped out from the nuclear blast, because that's generally how MPs work. It's just a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere. If they weren't killed out by the nuclear blast or the fallout, They would probably wish they were dead because, oh my God, Twitter doesn't work.
Wait, can we talk about that for a second? I've always thought with EMP it was going to be literally a pulse. You're saying it's connected to a nuclear kind of device?
EMP is an electromagnetic pulse.
Yeah.
The most common way of looking at it is look at a microwave. Mm-hmm. That's creating a minor EMP pulse. It's not strong enough to fry electronics, but if you set like an iPhone inside, you're going to destroy it.
Right.
The quickest way to create a city killing EMP field is to set off a nuclear blast in the Earth's atmosphere.
Uh-oh.
And that will carry with it an EMP field.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So then you just have nuclear like fallout falling from the sky.
That's much scarier than what I was
Yeah,
picturing.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's absolutely terrifying.
I mean,
That
that's not saying that you couldn't make an EMP gun, because some of the weird weapons of World War II actually had the Germans trying to make an EMP gun. They tried to make a death ray. Mm. And it actually worked a little bit. It had a range of about 50 feet, but it actually worked.
Well, the musket improved at some point, so I'm sure they would have found a way.
Yeah.
Oh, the Japanese had a really, really interesting one.
Let's talk about that. Because we're not near our time yet, but we're kind of getting where we're going to need to wrap up soon. Let's get into like weird or bizarre weapons that either like didn't fucking work or that were so strange that they did work.
The weirdest one that actually worked, and they actually used it, it was the Germans. The Germans, everyone's like, oh, the Germans had the best scientists and everything. They did have some good scientists, but they also had some really far out there ideas.
Mm. Well, they're real big on the occult and like aliens and stuff too. So
yeah, that's
going after the spear of destiny and all that stuff.
Yeah. The weapon in question that they actually worked and they actually used and it actually worked was what they called a vortex gun.
What's that?
That's basically where you shoot a column of coal dust up into the air and then you set it on fire. It creates a little vortex. They used it for low flying planes. They used it as an anti-aircraft gun. I mean, it worked. You could bring down planes, but they had to be flying pretty low. Yeah.
Okay, I never paid attention in any of my science classes. How does the setting it on fire create a vortex and all that? Like, what is
coal? Well, it's not actual coal. It's the coal dust. Mm-hmm. Coal dust is extremely flammable.
Yeah.
It's basically operating on thermal dynamics. A sudden change in air temperature or pressure creates a miniature vortex.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Oh, far out. Okay, I see. That's not. What else was something? What other weird, crazy things have there been?
Did they make an alien gun, like an alien ray gun?
They can't make an alien gun. It's terrestrial by nature.
He's got you there.
Yeah, like if we make it, it's not an alien gun. If we find it in space, it's an alien gun.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, did the Germans do that? Did they find one?
No, but the Japanese actually were working on it, and it failed horribly by virtue of the fact that they didn't have the power grid for it. Some place like America or Russia that has more space to build more power plants could probably do it if they actually wanted to. But a place like Japan, no.
So what was the weapon?
They got plans from the Germans and everything, and they were interested in making a death ray.
Okay. I love how many times back and forth throughout history, like real teams of scientists were like, "Let's make a fucking death ray." Paul. I'm serious. Don't fuck with me, Paul. We're gonna make a death ray. I've got some documents. You're just gonna fucking do it. Go get lunch. I'm serious, Paul.
It comes back and Tim's dead.
What happened? What happened to Tim? Hey, you told me you wanted some Frankfurters. I brought a thing of sauerkraut. What Tim? I don't know.
Why are your Japanese eating German food?
No, I don't know.
Because the Japanese can do what they want, you racist fuck.
Well, I know that, but I don't know. They sound Jersey and they're eating sauerkraut.
To me, anybody that's making a death ray sounds like supervillains.
Why are supervillains sound Jersey?
Because we're making this.
I don't understand your accents to your people. Your settlers sound like rednecks. Your Japanese scientists sound like Jersey people. I feel like you're completely
all bad guys
from here.
All bad guys are like fuck the song.
I feel like cowboys. I feel like cowboys him are gonna be Australians. Like,
good day, mate.
Good day, mate.
Good day, mate.
Shit. Okay,
that's not a knife. This is a knife.
All right. Well, let's get one final big question out there on the table on this one. Okay, we're speaking of like branches of the military and recent news and that kind of stuff. I told you I was going to ask you about
that.
It's coming. No, it's fucking coming. That's
I'm
right.
so excited.
Yeah, you want to talk about supervillains and death rays and all that kind of shit and how bad my Australian accent is? Well, fuck you, because we're going to talk about
Space Force. I'm so excited.
Bring it to me. What do you guys think about
can
Donald Trump's fucking Space Force? I didn't know. I did not know, in fact, what it was. I had heard about it. And I was like, oh, he went on TV and said some more stupid shit, whatever. Like, that happens every 15 minutes. But I actually went and listened to a little bit of the press conference, and I thought he was just talking about we're going to fund a little more of the space program. You know, maybe I found some money in the budget because he did do all this financial stuff, you know. But no. He literally was like, we're going to have another branch of the military. There's going to be the Air Force. There's going to be the Marines, the Navy, and there's going to be the Space Force.
He gets that accent.
I was
right,
going to say, that was pretty good.
Nailed
Literally.
it. He didn't have a British accent or anything. Great job.
What is the Space Force going to do? Like, what are they?
It's the same thing. Look, I don't know.
You are going to be in it because you think it's your ticket to Mars.
God.
Oh, man.
Space Force.
No, I don't want to use it because I want to go to Mars because they would never take me to Mars.
Bullshit.
I would just sit in on a space
yeah,
station.
whatever. If there's going to be Space Force, that's exactly where they're going to go is Mars.
I
I
think
also
it's,
don't want to join the military, period. Like, even if that gets me to space, no thanks.
it's been a few 100,000 years. The aliens are going to call.
But here's one thing that no one realizes is the last TV Republican president we had also had one called Star Wars, and it was Reagan. Did no one remember this? That Reagan,
he had a Star Wars, but the Star Wars program
was going to be satellites that shot laser beams.
When
at
you
the
say
Earth.
TV, do you mean celebrity?
He means a guy from like somebody that's not a
Entertainment
career
industry.
politician.
Okay.
Yeah, because we've had Republican.
I was going to just making sure you know.
No, he's talking about the last fucking
Sorry,
actor
gotcha,
basically that
gotcha.
we had. But the Star Wars thing in the 80s was really just like he was going to build satellites that were capable of shooting things that might crash into Earth. Like there were going to be satellites that could shoot asteroids. And
that sounds way better than Space Force.
Incorrect, sir.
What was Star
Both
Wars?
of them sound absurd.
Star Wars was a initiative that Reagan introduced as a deterrent to nuclear strikes.
Okay, so it didn't really have anything to do with like taking over space.
No.
Space Force.
Now, I do need to ask you,
Force.
Spencer, on the note of Space Force. I know this movie's very near and dear to your
Why are
heart.
you asking?
Would you join Space Force if it meant that you could be the first starfighter?
I'm not
You can't be the last.
I want to tell you something, Hunter. I grew up in the fucking 80s. I have no interest in being the first starfighter, but I would be the last starfighter. Zeke, what do you think about that? Do you really think that there's going to be a branch of the military called Space Force?
Yes.
If they do have a branch of the military called Space Force, I honestly think it would be a branch of the Air Force, sort of like how the Marines are with the Navy. However,
Shout out Brandon Lee. What up?
well, at the same time, I also see them as being two kind of exclusive things. The Air Force being more earthbound air threats, and the Space Force being, stuff outside the atmosphere.
Well, and see, now that's another actual kind of like a conspiracy theory type question is, do you think that maybe they're now introducing something like a Space Force as like part of the whole cushioning the impact, which is supposedly something that's been going on for years. Every time they go, we're going to do a space mission, or, we're going to put, is softening the impact of like
Eventually,
telling us they're aliens,
yeah.
Like, why would we need a Space Force unless they found something that they need to protect us from?
Maybe it's that, what is it?
We already had a Space Force. It was Bruce Willis and Ben Affleck, and they totally did it. Armageddon?
They had
Anybody?
sex.
Don't.
No, they write fuck that asteroid.
Get the fuck out of here. Casey. Just get the fuck out of here.
The guest has officially asked you to
Finally,
leave.
you have to get out. Yeah.
Oh, first time.
He
First
made an
time everything.
Armageddon joke. Okay, Jesus.
Well, it's mostly because I hate that movie.
Oh, it's terrible.
Just because of the stupid soundtrack.
Can I ask you something though? Whenever you, and I want you to keep this in. This isn't something I want you to edit out. Every time we use the word Space Force, from when you started it till now, every time it's said, I want some sort of like guitar power ballad.
Yeah. You got to do it.
Can you do it?
I'll actually use that sound right
Do
there.
it. Oh, that's great.
I'll put your fucking mouth sound on it.
Zeke, when Armageddon comes on
Sounds
TV,
so hot
does
when you
it
say
make
it.
you want to close your eyes and miss everything?
It makes me want to reach across the table and rip your throat out with my bare hands.
Well, he only has to reach across the table to reach Casey. I'm sitting next to Zeke, and I appreciate you not doing it.
I mean, you're arm length too. You better watch
All
out.
right, listen. We're kind of getting along. We're near the end of our time here. Zeke, go ahead before we cut out. What is your favorite weapon of all time? Either tank, or either like a machine that people ride in or fly in, or a handheld weapon. Or what do you think is the greatest weapon ever?
Well, it's kind of colored by personal preference because
Sure.
I actually operated one of these.
Okay, what is it?
It's the M2 Bradley infantry fighting vehicle.
Okay.
It's an infantry fighting vehicle is a battlefield taxi cab for infantry soldiers. It's designed to handle light and medium vehicles, and it's 30 tons of off-roading fun.
There you
Oh
go.
man,
It's
That's a good answer.
It's fully tracked, so it can go just about anywhere a tank can go.
Hell yeah.
that's a great answer.
No, that's super like American answer too. Like, what do you think's the badass ass vehicle? Fucking urban ass army tank cab,
Yeah,
badass off road cab, army cab.
Cool. Whenever you're saying that, you should put like the say can you see in the background, real light.
I feel like you have sort of like a distorted view of how many sound effects I have at my disposal. Casey's like, can you put that thing where like the giant explosion happens, like the Death Star or whatever? And then
Oh my
We
god,
just
can you?
finished-
That'd be awesome.
no, I can't do that.
we just finished plotting out Beacon House's third venture soon, and I think he's
I'm really
excited.
excited.
Yeah, you. Hey, I want to finish this episode off. I want to give a little shout out to a friend of mine that was a coworker of ours recently, Dalton Holland. I'm giving Dalton a shout out because he recently acquired some spiny mice.
What?
Okay, it's apparently some type of a species of mouse that can drop its skin, like the way a lizard drops its tail. Apparently, the thing can drop its skin off to get away. So it's a little crazy. Anyway, but he got two of them. He got a male and a female, and I was told today that he named the male and female spiny mice Wesley and Buttercup. Shout out Princess Bride.
Awesome.
Shout out Dalton. I hope that mouse doesn't drop its skin on you.
The female's like, drop your skin. He's like, as you wish.
I
Just
think a
drops
mouse
it.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah, fucking. That sounds like something bad that happens in high school. Like,
And it's kind of funny because
how was your date with Bobby?
The
Well, he dropped his
ROUSs,
skin.
the rats of unusual size, are in the Princess Bride, and now these
had to
are
go home
rats of
early.
like weird nature.
Okay, that's true. And speaking of weird nature, again, we want to thank Zeke, Charles Traylor for being here. And again, check us out on social media. Casey, why don't you tell them where all they can find us?
Beacon House Knox, Twitter, Instagram, and beaconhouseknox@gmail.com.
That's right, you guys. Listen, we're getting very close to the next mailbag episode.
Yes,
we could
we are.
use some more questions. You guys may email. Email is probably the best way at Beacon House Knox through Gmail.
In
Please,
fact, this episode's coming out, the week of the 4th of July? Or
this will be out the week before the 4th of July.
Anyways, it's getting close though. So
yeah, it's
That
close.
mailbag is getting awfully close, you guys. So send us some questions in. They don't have to be serious questions. It could be whatever. Just give us some questions. We want to. That was one of our favorite episodes, is to answer your questions about stuff. Please, we need some feedback. Hit us up on social media. Email us. If you know one of us, you can text us. Whatever.
Whatever.
Light up that mailbag. We're not
I'm
kidding.
a Japanese scientist.
That's-
Hey, bada bing, bada boom.
Hey, I'm one of the German super bad guys. that
Give me
make
some sauerkraut over here.
Hey, you can make a death ray.
Hey. Hey.
Sandy, what'd you do with my death ray, Sandy?
I dare say, oh boy, we gotta go fight for old Moscow.
Yeah. So
Well, howdy. I'm just a sailor coming off the Mayflower.
I hate every damn one of you guys.
Also, guys, I just wanted to point out that
Fuck you. Whatever you're about to say, fuck you.
right before I wrap this up, this Friday will be the very first actual episode of Party Chatting. All right, so it's Japanese scientist. I'm going to get out of here. You guys have a great night.
time's a flat circle, Marty.
Oh my.